Hi, my name is Karen Ziegler, and I help enterprise leaders cultivate the creative potential of their employees to innovate the future of how their companies work. And I do that through the delivery of design thinking, training, and consulting. Welcome to today's webinar, but first, design thinking. Why design thinking is the first and probably the only leadership training your enterprise needs in 2021. So let's get started. Who is this journey for? Who is this webinar for? It is for the leaders in an organization, whether that be the C-suite executives at the top of the organization, company leaders throughout the organization, from the lowest level of management to the obviously the C-suite, and also for aspiring leaders, those that want to aspire to be leaders in the future and be the innovative leaders that the jobs are requiring them to be in the future. Where does this journey start? Well, it starts at the early stage of 2021, having come off a heck of a difficult year in 2020. 2020 left our organizations grappling with many problems, many challenges, many things that seemed at times incomprehensible, unovercomable, if that's a word, and just sometimes difficult to bear. Three things kind of trickled to the forefront of 2020: people, problems, and pressures. We were experiencing those things at heightened levels all across our organizations, and as individuals, we were doing that as well. I sum up the year like this: the year of 2020 brought a flood of problems and pressures to companies and the people that they employ, and never before has the human element played such a significant role. Yeah, that's where this journey starts, and so next to where it is we're going. Where is this journey taking us? And if you will, pause the video and look in the comment description box below where you'll find a link to a handout, because I've prepared for a handout for you to take notes along with this webinar. It allows you to take down some of the key points. It's found that we recall 80% more just by taking notes, and 90% more if we take what we learned and share it. So I encourage you to grab that link, grab the handout, and the first thing I want you to do as I'm going over these items of where this journey is going to take us is to jot down the ones that you're most interested in learning about. And so here's where we're going today. First, designing what it means to be human. Second, the golden circle of design thinking. Third, design thinking, aka human-centered design. Next up, the rise of design thinking from process to innovative leadership. Next, the evolution of leadership and design. The next one is why C-suite's pursuit of design thinking is growing exponentially, backed with Gartner research, as well as coming up after that, why design thinking is the only leadership skill needed in 2021. I will answer the question that is the thesis for the webinar. And the last one, why employee preparedness is dependent upon leaders leading by design. So there's where we're going. I hope you had the chance to grab the handout and take down which one you're most interested in, and we'll go on to where we're going to start, defining what it means to be human. So what does it mean to be human? Here's how I define it. Being human is about self-awareness, self-realization, and offering the whole self in service to others. Now, I didn't come to that realization early on in my career, and I'd like to share a little bit of my story before I go into the diagram that's here on the slide. My first career straight out of college was in banking, in the banking world, and I did that for a decade. And it was there were many things I liked about it. was hired or started in my banking career in the merger mania decade of the 90s. So I really loved all the change and the constant pace of things. I loved getting into new locations and turning them around. In fact, I was quite the turnaround king or queen, trading up branches or locations every couple of years. And in fact, probably the climax of my career in banking as vice president was being a part of a 3-bank merger. Bank of America, whom I worked for, was a part of, or the first bank to usher in interstate banking at the time. And in order to make that happen, 3 mergers, 3 different banks happened at one time, and I was part of that merger team. But even though in each of those offices that I worked in and on the merger and acquisition team that I worked on, there were certain aspects I really enjoyed about the job. There was a lot of it that was just soul sucking for me. Something was missing. And so at the time, not knowing what exactly was missing and having had a new daughter, I decided to transition out of management into the private bank and be an investment advisor or a relationship manager in the private bank. And so I was just solely responsible for me, which was nice at the time. I could take care of my daughter and be there when she needed me to be. And I did that position for almost a decade as well. And as the crash of 2008 was coming, I had that same sinking feeling and that something was missing. There were aspects that I liked, but it wasn't fulfilling me the way I wanted to be fulfilled. And so I didn't get out before the crash, so I had to stay a couple of years into the recovery just to take care of my clients. But eventually I moved on, and I decided to try and figure out what that missing piece was. And I had always believed in service, and so I began serving in some faith-based organizations and teaching and helping them solve some problems, and even launched a nonprofit organization. But it didn't take as long as the previous 2 careers. After checking a lot of things off my bucket list as far as writing some books based on the leadership I was doing in the faith organization, and launching the nonprofit, as I mentioned, I still had that sinking feeling, and it come much faster, that something was missing. And so I began to look back. I actually went through a coaching program that had me look back through my life and careers and really dig into those times in my life where I was on fire. I was, delivering at the highest potential I had to deliver, serving others, and was the happiest. And so what I found in all 3 instances, the banking world, the investment world, and in the nonprofit world, there were kind of 5 key things that really lit me afire and just made me passionately go after whatever it was I was working on at the time. And so I said, well, if those 5 things are what sets my soul on fire, then I'm going to do that. And I don't know exactly what that looks like, but I'm going to do that. And so, having written a couple books, it's kind of like singing, If you're a good singer, you don't know how necessarily to teach someone to sing. You just sing really well. So those 5 things, those were who I was at the deepest level, I guess, but I didn't really know how to tell others, hey, this is what I do. So I went out and I began to research how to write about those things and kind of put it in some semblance of a consulting practice. And as I began to dig into what those 5 things were, I learned that it was design thinking. And so immediately, having been out of the business world in the nonprofit world, I decided that I would go to school, and I got my postgraduate degree in design thinking and innovation. And so that brings me here to today. But it was that alignment, and I like to call it mind, body, spirit alignment, that really made the difference for me and really got me to the place where I needed to be. And let's just talk about each of these, because it's really important that we understand them, not only as a leader leading employees, but also for our own fulfillment. And so let's begin with the gold egg in the middle of the diagram you see. I call it our spirit. It's also other names for it would be our being or our heart, our soul, our center. I've depicted it here as an egg because it is a perfect depiction, a golden egg, because this is where the gold lies in us. It is what makes us unique. It is our gifts and talents that, yes, we may have developed, but we really didn't have much to do with how they got there or what they are. But each of us has these gifts and talents. And from these gifts and talents is how we achieve our goals and our dreams. And so every human has this gold within them, this gift and talent that they're to bring to the world. But it's also an egg because this space within us is very fragile. And so, we have fears here. We have disappointments. We have so many things that each of us share as humans. So the spirit is probably the only piece of us that is universal. Everyone has gifts and talents. Everyone has hopes and dreams and fears and worries. We all have them. They may not be identical, but we all have them. And when we look to this part of ourselves and this part of others, then we can really begin to connect as humans. But it's not as easy as it seems. As you can tell from my story, it took me almost 3 decades to get there. But anyway, first, it's the spirit, the heart, also known as our being. When we're not trying to do something or impress anyone, when we are just being who we are, relaxed and content, then this is who we are, our being. So the next part is our mind. And my slides just went berserk there. The mind is made up of 2 parts, obviously, the logical mind, the left brain, and the creative mind, the right brain. There are several other labels for the mind. They include thinking. So you got being, thinking, or heart, head, and our center of reasoning. Our mind plays an important role, and in fact, in the age of information, the mind was the primary part of us that we use to accomplish our jobs and our tasks. But we'll get into more of the different ages and how we've evolved. But the next part is our body, and the body is the container of everything else. It is the manner in which we get things done, the manner in which we experience our life through the 5 senses. And other names for the body include the hands, or doing, and it is considered our center of action. And now, so mind, body, and spirit, or being, thinking, and doing, are who we are. But there's also a part of us that we can't see, and that is our energy. And science has noted that we each have an energy field of, I think it's about 8 feet, surrounding us. And this energy bubble is also known as our emotions. If you've ever walked into a room with people arguing and it be quiet, but you know something's going on, you've likely felt the energy of the room. Or if you walked into a party and it's just happy and everybody's having a good time, even before you said or did anything in that room, you felt the energy of that room. So that's what this energy is about. It is our emotions. In fact, oftentimes emotions are called energy in motion. So, and what I've learned through my journey, and I certainly don't claim to know how this works, but when our mind, body, and spirit, or our being, doing, and thinking are in alignment, our energy is positive and expansive, and we are moving forward without any hesitation or fear. But when something is misaligned with our being, thinking, or doing, then our energy is closed. That's when fear comes in or negative emotions come in. So this is important to know for our own self when we're feeling closed off or contracted or fearful or experiencing negative emotions like anger or frustration or any of the other negative emotions, that something is out of alignment with who we're being, thinking, and doing. And same for when we witness this in other people. When they are expressing negative emotions, then something is out of alignment for them as well. Now, this alignment obviously is a personal responsibility, but it can help us as leaders begin to coach and, help our employees in the area of growth. So, I wanted to start with this brief definition of what it means to be human, because this being, thinking, doing, evolution, and the alignment of it is really going to be the foundation that we look at as we talk about, what is human-centered design, what is the evolution of leadership and design, what is the evolution period. You'll see this coming through in several of the videos going forward. So hang on to that. Being, thinking, doing, and the alignment of that brings us the energy that we need to move forward. The golden circle of design thinking. And I'm a big fan of Simon Sinek and his golden circle. In fact, that is the coaching program that I use to kind of dig deep into what sets my soul on fire. But as it relates to design thinking, I want to talk about the what, the how, and the why of design thinking. First of all, the what. And that is really what it looks like. It's also known as human-centered design. Design thinking, in a nutshell, is a creative problem-solving process. And there's key variables. So here's the what of design thinking. There is the design team. Obviously, there's a design team with a design leader, which what we're talking about today here is you as a leader of your organization leading your team, now your design team, to creatively solve the problems your team faces. So whether your team's, 3 people in accounting or, a large organization, that's what this is about. You as the leader, your team as the design team. The vision, which in design thinking we call that the how might we statements. And the problems or obstacles, those things that are standing in your way of that vision. And then the users. And users are the key players in achieving the vision. And they are also, unknowingly, the keeper of the obstacles. And that's why design thinking is known as human-centered design. Because when we go to the users to talk to them about this vision that we have, then they begin to talk to us about their needs and the obstacles to why that vision isn't happening for them. So, and when it comes to you as a leader and your team as a design team, not the traditional sense of design thinking where it's an organization who's leading the design project and the user is the customers. This time, the users are inside the organization. They're inside your team. Your team is not only the design team, they're the ones that are going to create the innovation to solve the problems. They are also the user. So it's interesting, and it's a wonderful dynamic for improving collaboration and connection among a team, because not only are you focused on the users, which are your team, but you also get to use the creative talents of the team to solve the problems of the user. So it's a really self-agency type of process when you apply design thinking to within your own organization or within your own team. So that's the what of design thinking. The how the design thinking process works, which we will get into this in a little more detail in the next slide. But basically it's 5 basic steps. And I didn't label these, so there's many arguments out there of why they are labeled that way or that they're labeled incorrectly. But the 5 phases are empathy, define the problem, ideation, prototyping, and testing. And so that's the how. That's how you and the design team accomplish the innovation. And then the why. What is the purpose of design thinking? The why is to develop innovative solutions that improve both the enterprise and the user and their experience together. So if you think about in the terms of traditional innovation, when a company has a design team or an innovation department and they go out and they interview users and they try to create an innovative solution to their users' problems, their customers, they're not only improving the customer's experience, that's the goal, but they also want to improve the company's bottom line. And if they only do one and not the other, then it doesn't really benefit their relationship together. So if you improve the customer's experience, but it does nothing for the company, then that's going to go by the wayside, because obviously we have to profit as a company in order to continue to keep the lights on, pay our employees, benefit our shareholders, etc. But if it only benefits the enterprise and it really does nothing for the customer, then that's no good either, because they're not going to be any more likely to buy from you next time as they were before. It's really when both these parties experience a win-win, when the experience of the customer and the experience of the enterprise are a success, and it brings their experience or their relationship together. And that's how we get this topic of community, where organizations are developing communities now. It's because there's a win-win and they're both in it together. And so that's the why of design thinking, or what I like to call the golden circle of design thinking. In terms of the why of design thinking as it relates to you as the design leader and your team as the design team, and the ability to create this win-win situation, used to be the organization won, and the employees won. And the way the employees won was they got a paycheck, right? And the way the companies won is they got their work done. And so it was kind of a transaction-based, I do this, you do that, and we're all happy. Well, we know from all that's going on in our world today that that's no longer the case. Employees have tremendous needs, and the pandemic has really shined the light on those needs. No longer is just a paycheck the only need that they have. They have additional needs. And so by using design thinking as a tool for leadership, or leading by design, then you begin to understand the needs of your user and understand also the problems and obstacles they face as a human in relation to the vision that you have as an organization. And so when you can understand the user, your employees' needs, and their obstacles and problems that they face on a daily basis that keep them from achieving the vision that you have, and you begin to meet those needs as a leader, then you have an employee that is happy, they're engaged, they're enlivened to use their creative potential to not only reach the vision, but also to remove obstacles. And then you have you as the leader and ultimately representation of the organization that is achieving your goal of growing the creative potential of your employees, but also growing your organization. And so it's a win-win for both when you use design thinking, not only as a tool for outside innovation with customers, but as a tool for innovation within your own team, to engage them, to improve their experience, and to give them the tools they need to reach the vision that you have, and to let them be a part of reaching that vision, not just doing the work, but in being creative and problem solving and other things. So we'll talk more about that next. So let's dive a little deeper into what is design thinking. And before you on this slide is the 5 phases we mentioned briefly earlier: empathize, define, ideate, prototype, and test. And so those are the steps that you go through in an innovation project. And those are the same steps that you use when managing a team in leading by design. And we won't go into too much detail. Obviously, training is required to go through all 5 of these. But I want you to look at it in the through the lens of what we've been talking about, the being, thinking, doing. Because when we approach this process just from the strict doing sense of the word, empathize becomes a list of surveys and questions to ask and, check boxes to complete, customer journey maps, and emotions and different things that we want to look at for the user. But it's much more than that, and defining is the same thing. What are the problems that we see? Once we sift through all the data and analyze everything, what are the definitions? Ideation, again, is just a process of checking the boxes, but it's really much more than that when we begin to not only just do these activities, but also think in these terms and be in these terms. For instance, the empathy phase. One of the misunderstood aspects of design thinking is the empathy phase, that it's often talked about understanding feelings and really digging into feelings, but it's not so much the feelings that we are looking for as designers. Yes, they are important, but if you go back to our image of the mind, body, spirit, or the being, doing, thinking, and the energy field, really our emotions are a gateway. And if we do not allow the user to express their emotions, then their gateway is going to remain closed, and we're never going to get beyond the gate of emotions into what the actual needs are. And so that's one of the differences about empathy, is that we become empathetic in that we are accepting and non-judgmental towards their feelings. We allow them to express them, but it's not so much about understanding. If you've ever had a partner for any length of time, or maybe a good friend, you understand that emotions are difficult to understand. I've been married since college and to the same man, and there are still days when he can't figure me out or I can't figure him out. So emotions are not that easily understood, and it's important for a designer and their team to realize it's not the necessity to understand the emotions. It's the necessity of accepting them, allowing them to be, giving the user space enough to express them, but really, and then once that is done, then the gateway is open for us to get to the needs that are behind the emotion. And that's really what we're looking about, because innovations are not designed for creating emotions. They are designed for meeting needs. And as a result of those meeting those needs, then the emotion is created. So we kind of got to make sure we get the cart before the horse, or in the right order there. But these things become more than just a checklist that you do, and they become a way that you think as well as a way you become. And if you've ever studied any leadership principles, you know that being is a key component of a leader. They are being honest. They are being trustworthy. They are being a person of integrity. They are being transparent or authentic. So being is a very important aspect of this. And so when we as a leader become these things, when we become empathetic to our users, which are our employees, when we become problem solvers and seeing their needs as a problem to be solved, when we become the creative being we were designed to be, to ideate solutions that not only take the company resources into mind, but take the needs of the users into mind, then we are becoming an innovative leader. It's not just that we are doing the process of design thinking, we are becoming an innovative leader. Same thing with prototyping and testing, which is just a matter from the being state. We are allowing failure. That's what prototyping is. We're testing out our ideas that come from a being creative state to allow failure. And I like to call failure in this process more experimentation, because people equate failure with feelings of defeat or emotion, and this is really, the emotions are out of it. So when we are prototyping and testing, it's really not about failure or success. It's really about being curious to find out what is the the results, being curious about, did the ideas that we come up with meet the needs of the user? And if it didn't, going back to the user and getting curious again about what those needs are and where our ideas fell short or didn't quite meet those expectations. So again, we're moving from a doing state of maybe building something or trying a different process to a being state, and that is being curious. Is this going to work? And if not this, how can we tweak it and try something new? So really, that is what design thinking is, a human-centered approach to design. But it is also, we can take it or not take it, but practice it on different levels. We can practice it only in the doing phase, which will not accomplish much, and it's probably, if we could research it, the reason why a lot of innovation efforts fail is that it's just checking off boxes and saying I did that step, when in actuality we weren't aligning our whole human experience with that of another in not only just doing the steps, but also thinking in that way as well as being in that way. So let's talk next about when leadership and design thinking converge. And I've kind of alluded to this already, but innovation is no longer an ideal that a company department pursues, but a mindset embedded in every employee. And so what do I mean by that? In general, innovation is historically been a department within an organization that they go out and they interview the users, i.e. the customers, and then they create whatever the new innovation is. And they come back and they have to sell it to their C-suite executives and to the company as a whole. And sometimes they fail and sometimes they don't. But really, innovation is an island in that regard when design thinking is primarily restricted to a single department. What I'm talking about here is that now every leader in an organization becomes a design thinker, begins to lead their team like a design team. And in doing that at every level, then they begin to solve the problems that are within their control, within their scope of their department or their line of business. And then the things that are out of their scope or out of their line of authority get bubbled up. And so the ideas bubble up to the top and then the ideas bubble down. So no longer is innovation an island, it actually is an ecosystem where every department within an organization is practicing design thinking, and problems are being solved either right on the spot or they're being elevated to the levels that they need to be solved. And this really transforms change management, which we'll talk about in another segment. But change management no longer becomes something that leaders of an organization are forcing down an individual to the individual employee level, but change management becomes something that is being created from within the entire organization, that everyone in the organization sees it as a priority, sees it as an importance, sees it as something that's going to move the company forward towards its vision. And so what a difference it makes when we allow this idea of design thinking and leadership to converge. So next we want to talk about the evolution of the innovative leader. And we've already hinted at some of this, but I think it's important to kind of re-emphasize it as we move forward to talk about the evolution of leadership throughout history. So let's talk about the rise of design thinking from process to innovative leadership. And we've already alluded to the fact that this comes when we begin to shift our mindset from just strictly doing a process to the way we think, to the way we actually are being. And that is being a leader that's empathetic and problem solving and experimental and creative and curious. Those are the ways we rise from just a process to innovative leadership, when we shift from doing to thinking to being. And just to kind of give you some examples of the difference between just doing design thinking and then design thinking as innovative leadership principles, I just want to run through some quotes or some contrast between just doing and then the being part of things. And step 1 is empathy. And just simple definition is understanding the perspective of your user. But when you look at what a leader of a billion-dollar corporation and a billionaire in her own right, Oprah Winfrey says, she says leadership is about empathy. It's about having the ability to relate to and connect with people for the purpose of them, inspiring them and empowering their lives. So empathy is more than just a checklist of how to understand someone's perspective. It is about being an inspiration and an empowering force in the lives of the people that you influence through the process of empathy. Step 2, define the problem. As a process, define the problem is where you have a synthesis of the needs of the users and you reframe it into the vision for a better future. But Jack Welch explained it this way when he talked about being a leader. A leader's job is to look into the future and see the organization not as it is, but as it should be. So see the contrast there between doing and being. Step 3 is ideation, which in the process is the generation of ideas that meet the user's needs while remaining viable and feasible for the organization. But when you look at John Quincy Adams and his description of how to be a leader decades and hundreds of years ago, he said, if your actions inspire others to dream more, learn more, do more, and become more, you are a leader. And when we become a leader, an innovative leader using the process of design thinking, when we are being that person, that leader, that's what we're doing. We are tapping into our employees as the design team, asking them to dream more, to learn more, to do more, and to become more. And they do that through the process. Step 4, prototyping as a process or as a doing is an easy and expensive mock-up of a new idea, one that can be easily adjusted. But Jeff Bezos says this, be stubborn on the long-term vision, but flexible on the details. Long-term vision is key, but flexible on the details is how we prototype and test over and over again. That's leadership. It's not just a process. And the final step from going from doing to being is the testing phase. On the doing, it is the testing to ensure that the prototype meets the user's needs and gather feedback for improvements. And then Simon Sinek on being a leader says leadership is not about being in charge, it's about taking care of those in your charge. So when you begin to become an innovative leader that is being as the 5 aspects of the design thinking process, that's what you become. You become someone that takes care of those that are in your charge, not just being in charge with them. Okay, let's jump right into a little history, and we'll start with the information age. Now, obviously, the information age was when we first started coming out of our homes and off of our farms into the factories where we were making, widgets, whether it was, war implements or cars or whatever was being made. That was the industrial age. And the industrial age for the employee was really, if you had an able body, you could have a job and you just needed to show up and do your part on the assembly line and get your paycheck. That's where that exchange of you do the work and we'll pay you came about in the industrial age. And so for the employee, it was all about just having an able body, and it was very unfulfilling. And even though the industrial age lasted a long, long time, employees actually revolted because they were more than just their bodies. They were capable of so much more than just showing up to build a widget. Leadership in the industrial age was all about commanding. You managed, you commanded and controlled. The outcome was certain. You knew what the goal was, produce an widget, and the process was certain. Step 1, 2, 3, 4, and you got your widget. So it was all about command and control, and that was where the era of the manager came about. So the leader was the manager in the industrial age. The employee was the able body that was building the widgets, and design thinking was a process. that you just checked off the boxes and you could innovate the products that you were doing. As we shifted and employees really got dissatisfied with this arrangement, they wanted to do more than just show up and do a job. They wanted to use their brains. They had a brain. They could see that even though the assembly line worked fine, there was many other ways that they could use their brain to improve their work situation. And so they did revolt, which you can look up the history of that. And that ushered in the information age, where we really focused on the thinking, where employees were really not only needed to show up with a body, but they needed to be able to use their minds. And it was very important. In fact, it shifted from a lot of body doings to primarily thinking. And for the leader, this became a different style of management. And this is where leader as coach was introduced, because the goal was still fixed, but how you got to the goal could look a little different, could happen in different ways. And so it wasn't so much command and control like it was in the industrial age. It was more of a coach. This is our finish line, and I'm going to coach you and guide you where you need it to get us to that finish line. But I understand you have a brain and you know how to accomplish things. So I'll just be here to coach you and guide you across that thing. So it was really focused on the thinking. And so we were always in our head, primarily in the logical side of our brain, where we were thinking and analyzing and, ordering things. And so leader was as a coach, and so was design. It was more of a thinking process. You had to think and analyze and sift through all that. But prior to the pandemic, we were beginning to come out of the information age and move into the experience age. And the pandemic has really escalated that 100-fold, where no longer can we just show up with an able body. In most cases, that may not even be necessary. Or you use just our brain all 24/7. That is exhausting. We all found out in the pandemic. And not only is it exhausting, but it doesn't necessarily achieve the results we need. We need the creative side of our brain, which is connected to that golden egg that I talked about, the gold, the creative part of us. And not only do we need that to accomplish the job, but we also, having seen business's evolution to improve the experience of users, we see employees saying, wait a minute, there is more to life than this 24/7 thinking and solving your problems. I want to express myself. I want to be creative. I want to, bring my whole self to work. That is, we hear that a lot these days, and that is what the experience age. So experience age started pre-pandemic with customers and a lot of talk about improving the customer experience, but the pandemic has escalated. It's not about just improving the customer experience. It's about improving the human experience, and that includes employees and leaders and organizations and their customers. And so leading looks different here. Leading is shifting from leader as manager and leader as coach to leader as designer. Now, there are still opportunities where we need to be leader as manager. If the goal is fixed and the way to get there is fixed, then we just command and control. Those are rare, but they still exist. And then there's leader as coach. The goal is fixed, but the path to get there varies. So we just need to coach them through and keep them focused and going across the finish line. In the leader as designer, the goal, as we discovered in the pandemic, is sometimes often moving. The goal is moving, the way to get there is moving, everything's moving, and we have to be adaptable and agile and creative to accomplish what it is we want ultimately for our company, and to make it a positive experience, not only for the company, but also for the employees, which in turn makes it a positive experience for the customers as well. And so the experience age is leaders as designers, where the leaders are tapping into not only their own creative potential, but the creative potential of their employees to solve the problems, to see what the obstacles are for the vision they have for the company or for their individual department, and to make that happen by creating it. You know, used to you cast a vision and you had the steps or the strategy and you just check, 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 check. Now you have the vision, but you have to create the vision. You have to bring your full creative potential to the issues that are blocking the vision and accomplishing it in that way. And that's where the evolution of history kind of merges with the evolution of design as well as the evolution of leadership. And so next up, we're going to talk about the question that we came to talk about, and that is, why is design thinking probably the first and maybe the only leadership training your organization needs in 2021? Okay, please forgive me. I said we were going to talk about why design thinking was the #1 leadership training, but we have one more slide before we get there, and that is C-suite's pursuit of design thinking is growing exponentially. And this is kind of the foresight into the fact that design thinking is becoming so important in organizations. This research came out by Gartner Research Board prior to the pandemic, and I suspect that once they update it, it's likely even skyrocketed above this. But as you can see, the C-suite is pursuing their pursuit of design thinking is up 174% over the previous 3 years at the date of this recording. And that is above strategy and every other business skill that is important in the C-suite. And so why is that? Why is design thinking so important? So important that it comes in ahead of strategy, which if we could go back and look at history, I would imagine strategy's been at the top for infinity. But now design thinking is ahead of strategy in what C-suite executives are pursuing. And here's why that is. And I narrowed it down to a quote by a Polish-American scientist and philosopher, Alfred I'm not sure, I can't say his name, but he said the map is not the territory. In fact, he remarked that the map is not the territory, saying that the word is not the thing, encapsulating his view that an abstraction derived from something or a reaction to it is not the thing itself. So what do I mean by that? The map is not the territory. Well, when it comes to strategy, strategy is, in a nutshell, a very simple nutshell, it is our map of where we are and where we want to go and how we think we're going to get there. It often ends up in a document, which also ends up on a shelf somewhere, because the gap between the document itself and how it actually plays out is totally separate. And that's where design thinking comes in and fills the gap. Design thinking is the exploration of the territory. So you have the map, where you are, where you want to go, but design thinking provides you the exploration of the territory to show you or reveal to you in real time, not just, an idea in your head, but in real time, how you get to that vision, what it takes to remove the obstacles that are in the way between you and that vision, and how you begin to take the steps forward towards that vision. That's why it's real time, where strategy is, here's where we are, here's the vision, here's the steps we think that we should take. But design thinking is, these are the steps we should take, because we've interviewed the users and we've done the exploration and we've gotten curious and we've prototyped and we've tested and we know that these are the next steps. And so it's the real-time version of that, of what it is. So just a distinction that I want to put into here is that strategy and design thinking provide the who, what, where, when, and how. But everything else on that list, obstacles, problems, everyday must-dos that stand between the organization and the vision, those are how this design thinking is applied. So, as you look at this report from Gartner, design thinking and strategy really go hand in hand. They work together. One's the map, one's the exploration of the territory. They provide for us the who, what, where, when, and how. But everything else on that list, those actually are problems to be solved. In fact, that problem list grows much, much longer. And it's this growing list of problems to be solved that brings me to answering the question why design thinking is the only leadership training an enterprise needs in 2021. It is the list of growing problems that makes the only and most proven method of creative problem solving that's available to businesses today, the leading training that leaders need to have. When you think about the list of problems on the Gartner list and the list of problems that just scrolled before you, leaders must have an effective method for addressing those problems. So, we cannot expect our leaders to remain adaptable and agile and flexible and all those things, provide we can't expect them to do all those things and solve all those problems. It's a tremendous amount of pressure without giving them the tools to do it. And by delivering design thinking training to your organization's leaders, you are equipping them to accomplish that solving of those problems. You're equipping them to become those innovative leaders they need and that your organization needs for the future of your company. And that's not it. That's not only the reason why it's the only training that you need. Because when you look at any one of those problems, if you break it down, let me just break it down for you a little bit in the next slide. So if you take any one of those problems, and there are hundreds and volumes of them to solve, you can find, with a quick search of Google, the best practices that provide you potential solutions. But those potential solutions can reach infinity. And this is why our brains are so exhausted. If we have 10 problems and every problem has at least 25 best practices, we could spin our wheels and our employees' wheels all day, every day, 24/7 hours, 24/7 a day, and still not come up with a solution that works. Because guess what? In doing it this way, in finding the latest training or finding the latest book to read or article to read or the best practices and finding those and implementing those and teaching those, you still have missed one thing, and it's the most important thing, and that is the user, their experience, and their needs. Because you know what? 8 out of 10 of those best practices, or maybe even 10 out of the 10 of those best practices, are not what your employee needs. It's not what's going to solve their problem to help them to move forward. And so it's through our interviews with our users, which are our employees when it comes to leading by design, that we discover what is it they need and how do they see it being solved. Not always is it solved in the way that they want it, but it is the collection of our team and their suggestions for the solutions that's going to come up with the best practice that works for our company. May not be the best practice that made the Forbes list or, made this, large consulting company's training agenda for the year, but it's going to be the best practice for our employees, for our organizations, because it met the needs of our employees and our users. So that is, in a nutshell, why design thinking is the best and maybe the only leadership training that your organization needs in 2021. But next, I want to visit some World Economic Forum data to show you that not only is it the best and most important leadership training for your organization, it is also a way that you can prepare your employees for the future and the skills that are needed by 2025. All right, what you're looking at here is the top 10 skills of 2025 as outlined by the World Economic Forum in their latest report. So why does future skills, these on this list, preparedness, depend on Leaders leading by design. Well, if you look closely at this document, you will see that creativity, innovation, problem solving, analyzing, all the things that design thinking entails are the skills that are needed by the employees of organizations going forward. And why is that? One, well, first of all, because of the rising of AI, artificial intelligence, to pretty much eliminate all those mundane factory, don't have to think about them, they're logical, they're one step after the other kind of jobs that really suck the life out of us, suck our souls dry. Those jobs are quickly going to go to AI, and in fact, we're already seeing much of it go that way. All that's going to be left is the creative work. And so it's by tapping into that creative potential that design thinking and leading your team as a design team will allow them to accomplish. I believe it's 8 out of 10 of those skills on that list all are practiced and developed and begin to thrive when you lead by design and your team is involved in the design of the innovation that solves the problems that they have, that solves the problems that their customer has, that solves the problems that your organization has. It's that tapping into the creativity that design thinking provides that will prepare not only us as leaders to be innovative leaders in the future, but also our employees to be the creative employees that they need to be in the future. So now it's your turn. What questions do you have about this presentation, about this webinar? I hope you found it useful. If you did, give it a thumbs up. Share your comments and your questions below. I would love to connect with you. You can connect with me on LinkedIn at Karen Ziegler, and I look forward to connecting with you there and answering your questions about design thinking and how you can begin to train your leaders in your organizations to be the design team leader that their employees need. Thank you and have a wonderful day.